Welcome to another episode of Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement. I'm here at the News Forum where all voices matter. I'm pleased to have on the show Sandra Cobena. She is the Member of Parliament for the Ontario riding of Newmarket-Aurora and serves on the House of Commons Finance Committee for the Conservative Party. Welcome to Boom and Bust.
Hi, Tony. Thank you for having me.
Sandra, there's so much to talk about, but I want to start because you recently participated in a news conference to propose several measures to help families. Can you tell us a little bit more about that announcement?
Yeah, so it's essentially some tweaks to the paternal leave, maternity leave policies right now. And it came about because of actually an experience that I had myself. As you know, I have three kids. And right now, the way that the maternity leave is structured, you have to take it in a straight consecutive manner. And if you choose to come back, then you have to forego the whatever time you had left, which ended up happening to me. And so what we have introduced is the greater flexibility within the maternity leave policy so that mothers can negotiate up front and be able to come back for a period of time and then return to their leave. And of course, this would be helpful for the mothers, whether it's driven by the need economically, or if they work in a seasonal industry. So as you know, there is tax season. I was in finance, so finance has a season, legal, farming, and other industries as well. And so this flexibility or interruptibility already exists in Quebec, but not in the rest of Canada. And so we introduced that's one of the changes that we introduced in the broader package for family and work-life balance. We're also introducing a small change to allow mothers to be able to study while they are on leave and upgrade their skills if they have the ability to do so, of course, and also just earn a little bit of income while they are off without being penalized. So oftentimes, of course, particularly within rural communities, you might want to take care of the neighbor's children
Right.
and things like that and earn a little bit of income. Well, that's not possible right now.
Yeah, that sounds great. What's the reaction been to this proposal then?
Um, the communications that I'm getting has been very, very positive, and particularly within the youth.
Mm,
Because the feedback is, work-life balance is difficult, and right now the policies do not reflect the flexibility that we need, right? For example, for interruptibility, it allows the mother to stay plugged into the workforce, be able to pitch in during those busy times, and from an employer's perspective,
mhm.
you are not forced to lose a valuable trained resource for a prolonged period of time. And so it is a win-win situation, but it also reflects just the different needs of young parents and the flexibility that you need to be able to be a parent, but also continuing to stay in the workforce.
Of course, of course. Uh, you've been busy. I know that because you also introduced a bill. I'm going to probably say it the wrong way, but to protect the self-defense rights of homeowners. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
That's right. So it's called the Stand on Guard Act. And essentially, this act is meant to protect homeowners when there's an intruder in your house. And the easiest way for me to explain that to you is as a mother. If I am home and somebody breaks into my house knowingly and unlawfully, I want to have the certainty that if I defend my family, my children, and my home, that force that I use in that moment in time is deemed to be reasonable,
Mhm.
and that the law is not going to turn against me in my home for protecting myself. So the bill itself clarifies that presumption that a homeowner is deemed to be using reasonable force in that moment in time when there is an intruder in their home and they're trying to defend their family, and
Right.
also creates the presumption that when an intruder knowingly and unlawfully enters your home, oftentimes
Right.
it's in the middle of the night.
And welcome back to Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, here with Sandra Cobena. She is the Member of Parliament for Newmarket-Aurora. Sandra, we were just talking about your bill to protect homeowners. Continue with some of its provisions, and maybe also answer the question, like, is this based on feedback you were getting from people, from moms and others who were caught up in the law, that they were trying to protect their families and their home, and they weren't treated right by the justice system? So please continue.
Yeah, there's a number of cases that we have seen where a homeowner defends themselves, police arrive, they assess the scene, and the homeowner is also taken into custody and forced into costly legal battles, only to prove that they were acting in self-defense, and the charges eventually are dropped. But of course, not without first um, dragging the homeowner through this legal process, which is also costly. And just more broadly speaking, because of the rates of crime increasing, and oftentimes the offenders are repeat violent offenders.
Mm.
They're known to the police, and even then, the homeowner still sometimes charged. And so the idea here for the bill is born out of that, and to make sure that again the homeowners are being protected, but also just to create this idea that your home deserves a special protection under the law,
Mhm.
right? We're not talking about a public place. We're not talking about a bar. We're not talking about the mall. It is your home, and the idea that the law could turn against you simply for protecting yourself and your family is crazy. And so this bill then creates those clear presumptions upfront.
What sort of reaction are you getting to this bill?
It's very, very positive.
Mhm.
Very positive. In fact, it was overwhelming in terms of volume. And I was sharing with my colleagues and saying, I knew this was an important bill and I knew it was meaningful. I did not expect it to to be that
Right,
popular.
right.
And it's people from all walks of life that just stopped me to say thank you, because I think more broadly speaking, Canadians are tired of seeing, repeat violent offenders not have serious consequences, and homeowners, right, who do nothing wrong, can oftentimes be dragged through a legal process, and it shouldn't be the case.
Right, right, right. No, very, very timely. I hope some Liberal MPs will support it so it can pass Parliament. That would be ideal for sure. Now, I do want to ask you about your role on the Finance Committee, the House of Commons Finance Committee. As a member of Parliament, you're on that committee. What Tell us a little bit about that, and tell us about your analysis of the Government of Canada's, the Carney government's fiscal record.
Yeah, so I do sit in the finance committee, which was a pleasant surprise for me and perfect for me. As you know, I did was in the financial sector for 15 years before I decided to run. So this is definitely one of my passions. It has been eye-opening, I'll be honest with you, being in the finance committee, which is really where the bulk of the work happens, as you know, in the committees. And going through the Budget Implementation Act, and I took on a debate on the sweeping major powers that the Liberal government wanted to give their cabinet ministers and give them the ability to exempt any person, corporation, or entity from any federal law except for the criminal code, which seemed crazy to me at the time, and was able to debate with a number of the cabinet ministers, including the Minister of Finance, and not being able to get any credible uh, reasonable
Right.
excuse for actually having that. And eventually, I think they realize that this is absolutely undemocratic and unnecessary. And we push for some amendments to bring about accountability, transparency, but also a mechanism to for us to consistently streamline processes and regulation and make sure that the rules apply equally to everybody, not just the few selected ones that are closest to government and with political connections.
We're having a conversation with Sandra Cobena. She is the Member of Parliament for Newmarket-Aurora. We're going to take a brief commercial break, but we will be back with our guest in a few short moments. Stay with us, please. And we're back, happy to be in conversation with Sandra Cobena. She is the Member of Parliament for Newmarket-Aurora for the Conservative Party. Sandra, again, you're on the Finance Committee of the House of Commons. What's your take on the state of the Canadian economy right now?
Well, we're seeing some very concerning indicators, not only in terms of the $1 trillion that of investment that has left our country, but most importantly, we are seeing this entrepreneurial drought, which is what the CFIB called, where we have 6 consecutive quarters of more businesses shutting down in Canada than opening up. And so this is a trend that is particularly concerning because, as you know, when we talk about the economy, we're talking about that sector of the market, the small to medium-sized enterprises that create the jobs that are oftentimes the first jobs that youth get, and we are seeing them struggle, and not only struggle but shut down. More specifically, actually, I had a roundtable with the food and beverage sector here in my riding, analyzing some of the very concerning statistics of within the sector, where 7,000 restaurants shut down last year, and then there's a few thousand more that are expected to close this year, and they are being squeezed because we see food inflation, which is a major input for them. We see the
Mhm.
cost of fuel that impacts everybody, but particularly the food and beverage sector. And they are the first ones to see consumer shifts because, of course, when people are living paycheck to paycheck, the
Mhm.
first thing that they will cut out will be going out to eat, and so they are being squeezed and really struggling in a desperate need to get some relief. Unfortunately, we are not seeing anything in the pipeline from the federal Liberal government that will help with that. We, as you know, have been advocating for cutting all federal taxes on the cost of fuel for the rest of the year to provide that relief, not only to Canadians, but also to business owners
Right.
who are seeing those costs pass on and they're being squeezed. So I am particularly concerned about that. Consumer insolvencies also are going up, and I think that's a reflection of, you know, so many years
Mhm.
of inflation and inflationary spending that leads into inflation. And it was interesting because I had a discussion with the governor of Canada who said, yeah, somebody can say, well, inflation is 2%, but nobody pays inflation at the grocery store. They're paying prices, and prices
Right.
are up, and they haven't come down. So that's a major issue that I think everybody's feeling.
And indeed, you mentioned in passing there, the government of Canada has, record post, not in the COVID sense, but anything else but record deficits. So it's not as if the fiscal policy of the government of Canada, the Carney government, is helping.
No, and in fact, what is concerning is, yes, we have seen 11 deficits now being delivered. And the prime minister, who sold himself as a finance guru, is normalizing these
Mhm.
deficits.
Mhm.
There is no path to balance in sight, and in fact, in the most recent economic statement that was released. The spring economic statement, we are seeing still $67 billion in deficit, but it does not include some major ticket items
Mm.
within that deficit, namely, the largest procurement in Canadian history, probably with the submarines, $100 million. We are not seeing any of the defense spending. Of course, it does not include the entirety of the Alta project. And the most concerning one uh, was the $25 billion that is going to be borrowed to seed the sovereign wealth fund.
Well, I wanted to talk about the sovereign wealth fund. What's your reaction to that?
Well, it does not make sense because a sovereign wealth fund, in the traditional sense, is typically seeded with surpluses, and of course, as you know, we are running a deficit. The prime minister himself used Norway as an example. Well, they are running excesses, surpluses, I should say, and they seed the fund with oil and gas money.
Right.
They're typically strong economies that have steady flows of income from the oil and gas, and they invest in everywhere else around the world except in their own country to be able to diversify, of course, their exposure, which is what every rational
Right.
investor would do. And here they're doing the opposite.
Sandra, we're going to take another brief break. We'll be back with you after these messages. Welcome back to Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, having a conversation with Sandra Cobena. She is the Member of Parliament for Newmarket-Aurora, representing the Conservative Party of Canada. Sandra, I wanted to talk to you about there's a lot of chatter about the Carney government making or promising to make improvements in getting big projects uh, through the system and therefore help the economy. Is this working?
Well, if you think back to the major projects piece of legislation C5 and how that was sort of fast tracked and everybody came together to give the prime minister the ability to fast track these major projects, this was done already last year. So the prime minister, in fact, has had the ability and the power already for over a year, but he has done nothing with it. And that is the biggest frustration where we can't, or the prime minister cannot point fingers at anybody but himself
Mm.
in this case, because there was a promise of moving, as you know, at speeds never seen before, and yet we're still waiting. We're not seeing any of these major projects. And then, of course, now you layer on the sovereign wealth fund where it's supposed to be investing in these major projects that nobody knows which projects, nobody knows the timelines,
Mm.
and so there's a lot more questions to be asked. And yet, the broader public is being asked to pitch in and invest in this fund that nobody understands. I personally genuinely just wanted to understand how this was gonna work, and also not only mechanically, but also in terms of the cost. The interest on the debt, that's been taken on, but also the cost of establishing it. And if a project goes sideways, then who's on the hook for that? Is it the investors? Is it Canadian taxpayers? And I asked the Bank of Canada, he had not been consulted. He did not have any costing associated with
Mm.
it. He said, "You should ask the finance department," which I did, and there was no answers there either. So there's a lot of confusion, a lot of pretty headlines, of
Yeah,
course,
yeah.
but there's no real justification for this, and there's also no clarity in terms of what is this sovereign wealth fund going to do that all the other crown corporations already don't, because as you
Mm.
know, there was the Canada Infrastructure Bank, and we have even more traditional options for
EDC,
Canadians to
exactly.
invest
Yeah,
in
yeah.
Canada. Yes, exactly. So my fear is it's going to be $25 billion that will lead to wasteful
Mm.
spending and a lot of or additional interest costs that will be on the backs of Canadians.
Sandra, we got about a minute and a half left, and I wanted to ask you a more general question. You've been in the House of Commons for just over a year now. So, what is the biggest, maybe surprise or takeaway after 1 year on Parliament Hill?
um My biggest frustration, I will say, is, I came in wanting to move, uh, yes, very quickly, make meaningful changes. And as fast as I want to run, I can see that the government in power does not necessarily want to move at the speeds. I do feel it's been a year now, and it
Mhm.
has been the privilege of my life to be able to stand up and literally give a voice to the frustrations and concerns of the people that I represent, but it is met with the deaf ears,
Mhm.
and I recall distinctly my maiden speech. I said, uh, "We need the urgency to meet this moment,"
Mhm.
and I outlined the precarious situations of the very people that I represent, and I said, "Let's move with the urgency that this moment deserves." And yet, I'm standing here today going, I'm still hearing the same stories, and it has been a year.
Well,
But
you've got a bright future ahead of you, so don't give up just yet, all right? And
oh, no,
thanks
no, I won't.
thanks for coming on the program. We hope to have you back, but thanks for answering my questions today.
Thank you so much,
Okay,
Tony. My pleasure.
thanks for watching today.